Hey everyone, Eric Dutram here with the latest edition of the Dutram Report, the podcast on ETFs and more. Today we have with us Steven Schoenfeld, founder and CIO at Blue Star Indexes. In this edition, we talk about a high-growth area of the tech world that investors often ignore, Israel. There are actually a few key reasons for why Israel has become such a tech powerhouse, and we explore those, as well as a few key companies this culture has produced in the podcast. So if you have any questions or comments, make sure to send them in to podcast@zacks.com, and don't forget to find the Dutram Report on iTunes and give us a review there as well. But stay tuned for my chat with Steven right after this. Okay, Steven, thanks for joining us. So today we're taking a closer look at the technology world, but not just any tech market, Israeli technology in particular. Now, this is an area I think most U.S. investors probably aren't too familiar with, but you're seeing some interesting trends there. What has been going on in Israeli tech as of late that investors should be aware of?
Well, thanks for having me, Eric, and I'm real happy to talk about Israel's role in the global tech industry and tech ecosystem and some of the leading companies in Israel which are at the forefront of tech innovation worldwide. It's pretty universally acknowledged that after Silicon Valley, Israel is the next center of high tech. Israel has more startups per capita than any country in the world. Some of the most well-known technologies, from Waze to elements of smartphones, disk on key, have been developed in Israel. And many leading Israeli companies they may be based in Israel, but they're global. And despite all that, Israeli tech and the public tech companies are significantly underrepresented in global technology indexes, and so most investors don't have significant exposure. So we feel that any serious tech investor, especially one who's forward-looking, looking at the next cutting-edge areas of tech, needs to take a serious look at Israeli tech companies.
So, obviously Israel isn't that big of a country, so how did they become such a technology powerhouse? I mean, it's pretty small in the scheme of things, population-wise.
Population and size. Israel's about the size of New Jersey. Population of 8.5 million, so very small, but an incredible combination of factors. And books, including the book The Startup Nation, have been written about it. There's cultural. Israel as a country is a startup. It was founded only in 1948 by refugees from Europe and Arab countries. It has had to be scrappy to survive in the desert and build an economy, and also it's unfortunately had to fight a lot of wars of self-defense. And so the combination of a can-do attitude, very high educational standards and levels, a culture of can-do, and a culture that in a way doesn't respect authority. Junior employees will question the CEO, so there's a lot of questioning. Failure is not considered a career-ending event. So sort of a very deep entrepreneurial culture powered by world-class universities, amazing diversity. I mean, Israel is a country with citizens from whose origins are more than 70 countries and whose mother's tongues are from all over the world, literally. And also the crucible of every Israeli citizen, man and woman, is serving in the IDF, and they get enormous experience early on in their life in leadership. And then they go to college. So whereas American kids are learning which keg has the best beer in it, Israeli youth are taking huge responsibility for people and for the defense of their nation, and then go to college. And I think that has a strong effect as well.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this idea of the startup nation. I see that Israel actually has more companies listed on the NASDAQ than any other foreign country. I was also reading part of this might be due to the venture capital surge the country's been seeing over the last couple of decades. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about that as well.
Sure. So Israel today also has not only more startups per capita than any other country, it has more venture capital invested in technology. It has more than 300 global technology companies have R&D facilities in Israel. And the VC industry and the startup culture really got going in the mid-90s, which was just after Israel took in a wave of highly educated immigrants from the former Soviet Union. And you now have serial entrepreneurs and serial venture capitalists who are again, second only to Silicon Valley, amongst the most sophisticated in the world. And this creates a hothouse of innovation, both to form new companies and as foreign companies make acquisitions or set up their R&D center, it powers their innovation. So Intel has designed most of their most advanced chips in Israel and manufactures a number of them. Microsoft, Apple, Cisco, PayPal, they all have done acquisitions and have acquired technology, but then they build on what they acquire and create R&D centers. In the field of cybersecurity, even though Israel is so small, as we noted, Israel is attracting between 15 and 20% of all investment worldwide in cybersecurity. And there's a major initiative in Israel to create another hub, actually south in the desert in Beersheba, for cybersecurity. And you put that all together, and you could feel the energy in the streets in Israel when you are looking for tech innovation.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like a real great situation going on over in Israel. Let's talk about some of the companies that this sort of nexus of capital and culture has produced. I'm seeing a couple names that U.S. investors probably will be familiar with. We got Mobileye, Checkpoint Software are two of the bigger ones. Maybe you could talk a little bit about these two giants in particular and what they've been doing in their respective markets.
Sure. Well, I'll start with Checkpoint because we just mentioned cybersecurity. Checkpoint literally invented the term firewall. It was founded more than 20 years ago when cyber threats were not nearly as known, and it was founded by some officers, former officers in Israel's elite cyber military unit. So they had already had enormous experience and recognized the threat. Checkpoint is one of the world's leader in cybersecurity. It just announced, record earnings and positive guidance for 2017, and the stock is trading at multi-year highs. And at the moment, it's the top-weighted stock in the index that we've developed, the Blue Star TA Biggie Tech Index, which I'm sure we'll discuss a little further. Mobileye is the world's leader in autonomous driving technology. The research and the founders came out of Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and they have been gathering data and building more and more sophisticated systems, and they are now in pole position working with companies like Intel and BMW and Honda and others to be rolling out fully autonomous vehicles by 2019 or 2020. And Mobileye is unique in that it has an open platform approach, so it is partnering with more than half of the world's automakers in various stages. It has deep partnerships with Audi, with BMW, with several U.S. companies, and it has partnerships with other auto parts makers, Delphi, as well as with Intel. So it's one of the leaders, and its incredible market share and the potential for autonomous driving, we feel, is quite good.
Yeah, it seems like Israel's kind of focusing in on some of these more high growth areas. We're seeing cybersecurity, autonomous vehicles. Are these kind of the main areas for Israeli tech going forward? And then what also do you see as the risks for Israel in the next couple of years, especially in terms of its tech sector?
So if you take any of the what I would call disruptive or cutting-edge technology areas, there's several Israeli companies right in the heart of it, whether it's biotech and medical technology, whether it's 3D printing, clean tech, defense technology, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, and software, hardware. The best way to describe it is to actually take the old Intel commercial of Intel inside, and if you look around the tech ecosystem, both consumer products and B2B products, there's some Israel inside almost every tech activity. Some of it's not very visible. An Israeli company, Amdocs, is the world's leader in billing software and billing technology, so it's used by almost every mobile phone carrier in the world. You don't see their logo there, right, because it's done behind the scenes. Mobileye's technology is also not always visible, but they're partnered with so many automotive manufacturers. So some of it's behind the scenes. But even in areas like geothermal energy, which Israel does not have any of the formations that are required for geothermal energy, but an Israeli company called Ormat Technologies is one of the world's leaders, and they have operations in New Zealand and in Chile and in Indonesia and, of course, in Iceland. And this sort of speaks to the global footprint of Israeli tech companies.
Interesting. Yeah, even in technology you might not expect, it seems like Israel is kind of a leader. So what do you think are some of the risks for the country heading forward here?
So we'll start with the companies. I mean, in tech, things happen fast and change fast, and companies that don't adjust will have problems. It's amazing to me that Check Point has continued to be a leader even as cybersecurity has evolved and gone from kind of perimeter security to security within networks. So first and foremost, the individual companies have to keep up. This is why I'm a big believer in buying a basket of technology companies and not always betting on just one or two. As far as Israel's geography and its security challenges, I'm an optimist. Israel definitely lives in a rough neighborhood, but it has developed so much sophisticated defense technology as well as a military that is adept in this technology that I believe it's going to counter threats. It's unfortunate that right next to Israel, the terrorist group Hamas is running Gaza as a militarized enclave and is regularly shooting rockets at Israel. But because of that, Israel, partnering with U.S. defense companies, developed something called the Iron Dome, which is the first system to be able to shoot missiles down in midair, at the low level that these rockets from Hamas came. Israel also faces threats from Iran, and Israel's developed other higher altitude missile defense. And in fact, just in the past few weeks, they've operationalized it. So if you think of layers of defense, Israel now has 4 different technologies for different altitude types of threats, and they will continue to do that. Hamas has also dug tunnels from the Gaza Strip. It's unfortunate. I wish they used that energy to build housing. So Israel has developed cutting-edge tunnel detection technology. They've developed, aside from Israel being a leader in aerial drones, they've developed autonomous ships to protect their coastline and to protect their recent discoveries of natural gas. And they've also developed, believe it or not, autonomous underground, they call them snakes, right? So if you're going to be going after terrorists in a tunnel, better to send something unmanned first, right? So I'm not sanguine, and I don't think anyone in Israel is sanguine about it. Everyone serves in the military, so no Israeli wants his or her son or daughter to be in harm's way, but they persist and have created a really world-class economy despite the threats. So I'm optimistic, but certainly not sanguine.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the basket idea of investing that you briefly mentioned earlier. I think that's a good segue for the Blue Star Index that you mentioned, which is also the basis for the Israeli Technology ETF, which trades under the symbol ITEQ. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the construction of this product. How did you guys decide what was included?
So just as with the other broader total Israel indexes in the Blue Star Index family, our philosophy is to be broad, deep, pure, and complete. So we want to be as broad as possible in defining the entire Israeli market. And then in the case of technology, we didn't want to just be hardware, software, semiconductors. We wanted to include all of the areas that Israel is known for and is in the forefront. So this includes, of course, cybersecurity. For IT, we have hardware and software, defense and defense tech, big data, clean and renewable energy, biotech and medical devices, and sustainable agriculture. So it's tech broadly defined, and within that definition, we go as deep as reasonable while still looking, having minimum market cap, liquidity, and float. We built this index ourselves in 2013 with 10 years of rigorous backtest. So we now have 15 years of history, but in 2015, we partnered with the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. We're the first firm to have a partner index of this type with the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange now has a representative on our index committee. So we have access to the research and the knowledge of Israeli companies that the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange trading and economic departments have. And so we stay current. Obviously, companies get acquired. IPOs. So we have rules about when a company enters, when a company exits. But the goal is to be the broadest, deepest benchmark for Israeli technology. And we're proud not just that there's the ITEQ ETF trading here in the U.S. on the NASDAQ, but there's also two products for Israeli investors listed on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange using this same index. So we built what we felt was the best benchmark, and it's now been accepted in the home market.
And what do you say to people out there who might be saying, you know what, I'll just buy a regular tech sector ETF or more targeted tech segment fund, or even a broader market Israel ETF like EIS or ISRA? What do you say to those people?
Well, certainly if investors don't have sufficient exposure to Israel as a whole, getting more exposure through something like the ISRA ETF on the NYSE is better than not having enough. And tech is about 33% of that index. But for tech-focused investors or U.S. investors who are excited or have an overweight or just an interest in tech, we feel it's critical to go beyond the existing products simply because Israel's not in it. And it's not that the index products that were previously available have a bias against Israel. It's just because of the rules, they're not in it. So if you look at the S&P Global 1200 Tech Index, which has an ETF, there are no Israeli companies in it because that has only the mega cap tech companies. If you look at the Select Spider for tech, you don't have any Israeli companies because it only includes U.S. companies. But even more specialized indexes, Tech Software Index, QTech, which is the ETF for the NASDAQ 100 Tech Index, in general, they may have one or two Israeli companies, almost always Checkpoint or Mobileye. But the QQQ and the QTech don't even have Mobileye. And Mobileye would qualify, but those two ETFs only include companies listed on NASDAQ, and Mobileye happens to be listed on the NYSE. They're probably missing a few other companies, not just Israeli. So it's only in Small Cap Information Technology Index, the ticker's PSCT, or the HACK Cybersecurity ETF, or a couple of the smaller biotech indexes, well, not even smaller, even IBB. Only those have more than two Israeli companies, and so they have 3 or 4 or 5.
Okay.
And so you're really not getting exposure to those companies unless you take that dedicated allocation, and that's why we're so happy that the ITEQ ETF is out there for investors to get that exposure.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a real blind spot for a lot of these funds out there. So how do you see this product fitting into someone's portfolio?
So we would see it being used in two ways. First, if you're looking at the international or global part of your portfolio, there's a kind of tech underweight in general in developed markets because there's so many other companies. So if you have your developed market exposure, and as it is, you don't have much Israel, ITEQ could be a good supplement to add a little tech and a little more Israel to your international equity allocation. The other area where we think it should be used is those who focus sectorally and may even be really thoughtful in how they put together. They may combine XLK with QTech, and maybe even they use a few other thematic ETFs. It could be HACK, it could be online retail ETF that was recently launched. And we think in that, adding ITEQ really helps complete and enhance a tech portfolio or a tech basket. So we would see those two areas as being the right place for a long-term investor to make a dedicated allocation. Obviously, when tech is in favor, when you see the trends moving in, let's say the bigger stocks in ITEQ, then those who are tactical traders or momentum traders may also find ITEQ interesting. There's one development that could be a catalyst for that. Israel has a large domestic investment community, pension funds, insurance companies, and they generally use the index that is calculated for domestic investment. So they're underweight themselves in Israeli tech, which is kind of ironic. But they're beginning to understand that their main domestic benchmark which is called the TA 100, so it's sort of the S&P 500 for Israel. It's missing Israeli companies that are listed abroad. So we think that sometime in the next it could be 3 months, it could be 2 months, it could be 6 months, Israeli domestic investors are also going to wake up to what's missing in their portfolios, and that could be a catalyst as well.
Okay. Well, Stephen, thanks for joining us. I think this is a great discussion on an area of the tech world that investors often forget about, but clearly they shouldn't overlook this spot in the future. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Eric, and a pleasure speaking to your audience.
All right, everyone. That was Stephen Schoenfeld, founder and CIO at Blue Star Indexes. The ETF that he discussed trades under the symbol of ITEQ, and the broad Israeli ETF that follows one of their indexes is ISRA. Well, hope you enjoyed this edition of the Dutram Report, and make sure to tune in for more interviews and discussions on the world of exchange-traded funds in the future. And for my thoughts on the ETF world, make sure to go on over to Zacks.com and check out the ETF Investor Service, which includes my top picks and commentary on the markets. And don't forget to find the Dutram Report on iTunes and give us a review there, and let us know if there are any topics or questions you have for us at podcast@Zacks.com. Until next time, for Zacks.com, I'm Eric Dutram.